Mitch, welcome to Sweetwater.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
How many videos have you done?
About 3,000, believe it or not.
3,000.
Yeah, but nobody's ever welcomed me before.
Well, I just did.
Jeez, all these years I've missed out.
I don't think so. So I want to talk about amplifiers.
Good.
And we're going to do a demonstration with you playing this private stock through an amp that shouldn't work. So let me just go into it for a minute. We've got you plugged into an HDRX 20, which is not considered a clean amplifier. But any amp that we make that you buy from Sweetwater should be able to amplify the guitar in a musical way, in the way that you want. So for me, I want the bass note in the right place. And when I say the right place, that it sounds musical and the musician likes it and the recording engineer likes it. So this is going in straight into Pro Tools, right? You want the mid-range to be as musical without being peaky, and you want the high end to be really sweet, which is not something you would think about an HDRX 20. But I thought that guitar through that amp sounded gorgeous. Why don't you play for everybody?
It sounds pretty amazing. You know, you think of a jazzy guitar. It's all there, right?
Well, you wouldn't want the bass note woofy.
No.
And it's centered about where you would want it.
Yeah.
And the mid-range sounds good to me, and the high-end sounds good to me. So, but that's the theory with amplifiers in general. I mean, a lot of people don't know that, I mean, all the police records in Sweet Home Alabama were played on Marshalls.
Right.
And they're crystal clear. It's not that it has to be distorted. People kind of pigeonhole stuff. For me, whether it be an Archon Classic, or it is a HDRX, or it's a Sanzera, or it's whatever amp we make, you should be able to get that kind of tone out of it. And there was nothing special we did other than plug you in and turn knobs until it sounded beautiful.
Yeah.
So let me see what it sounds like with my hand. It almost sounds like a chorus pedal.
Yeah.
Now, clearly, I have very different sounding hands than you do, and the amp was amplifying it beautifully. So,
so is that your philosophy of this then? That of course you also switched to the bridge pickup. So that was.
My philosophy is the amp is musical for any kind of music that you play. When we made these Hendrix amps, which we were able to open as amp, I thought everybody wanted to sound like Hendrix. Lettieri doesn't want to sound like Hendrix. He wants to sound like himself. Right. All these guitar players were buying these amps, were using them to get their sound. They were using pedal boards, they were doing all kinds of things that I didn't think they would be doing. And for all of our amplifiers, to have it be such a rough test to be able to play jazz guitar through that and still not, I don't think it's just surviving, I think it sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
And to me, that's a good test for an amplifier. Let's try to get it to do something that people in general don't think it was intended to do, and I think it's a good example for the video.
Yeah.
I'm playing through an old MDT. Kenny Greenberg called me, he's using those amps at the Sphere. Because the sound man thought that was the best amp that he had for that mic situation. You got to remember, Sphere, they're not listening to PA, they're listening to in-ear monitors and speakers coming out of your chair.
Right.
But that amp is not just surviving, it's handling it beautifully.
Right.
And it wouldn't be something that you would pick. And I'm suggesting that of any of the amps we make, it should be able to do that. The one that's behind me, any of them. And I think that's a good example of what an amp should be. It should be musical. Everybody goes, well, what about this and what about that? I want it to be musical, how musical it is. Even if it has a bad EQ, if it sounds beautifully musical, it wins. I have a rock star that said to me, he says, well, it makes one squawk. My God, what a squawk. I would rather, but that's a multi-squawk device.
There you go,
right?
there you go, right.
Look, it's hard to understand what amp to buy. There's so much information on the web and you don't really know. And for us to do such a different kind of demonstration, which I didn't expect you to pick up that guitar, and I didn't expect us to plug into that amplifier for a jazz sound, but if I haven't done my job, that is not going to work at all.
Right.
So you did good. You done good.
Thank you. You too.
You've got a beautiful sound in your hands.
You're very kind, very kind. So you've been doing the amp thing for a while.
Long time.
Doug Sewell out of Texas, and he's here today as well. I mean, just a master builder, and the combination of you guys with your ears on that stuff it's got to be fun.
It's fun, but you also, you know, when we were working on Mark Tremonti's amp, he said, I want the middle channel to sound like this, and he brought his Dumble set on the table. Yeah.
So where do the ideas come from for the different amplifiers and for the approach that you take to those?
Well, the Archon, I'll blow through it really quickly. We wanted a really modern sound, and the Archon Classic is halfway between that classic amplifier, so it's in the middle. With the HDRX 20, 50, and 100, we were duplicating the amp that we took apart at Paul Allen's museum that Hendrix had used at Woodstock. With the Sanzera, that's a poor man's Dumble. That's like a deluxe reverb and a Dumble in the same box, but it's only 20 watts. There's a pile of other amps that we make, whether it be the David Grissom amp, which is going very well, whether it be whichever amp, there was a goal in mind. And I'm always surprised that very often the amps are being used for things we didn't intend it. The Archon clean channel was so loud in the original 100 watts, all the country guys were using them. Because they wanted that super aggressive country clean tone, and they wanted it loud. And they're wearing in-ear monitors, and the amp is blowing through the inserts, you know. These things were, you know, it wasn't subtle by any stretch of the imagination. So that makes me happy. I like that part. But for me, I like plugging straight into an amp, and it's got to survive well that way, and a lot of people are using pedals, you know.
Well, there's some common threads that run through your amps for me personally as a player. One is that balance is always there. That bottom, mid, top, sparkle, that balance is always there.
And not out of balance.
Yeah, not out of balance,
That's
and then you can adjust from there, which is really great. But the other thing about them is that they're always very dynamic and articulate.
Well, that wasn't compressing at all.
Not at all, no, and that's, to me, I'd rather have too much dynamics and dial it back from there than not have enough dynamics and not be able to play that you want to play. And so that's always been a feature that's really jumped out at me with all the amps of yours that I've played through.
Well, that's the power supply. And the power supply has to have enough reserve that it doesn't give up after a certain volume. It's also the output transformer's got to have a musical sound to it. So, look, there's so many series parts. You're going through this capacitor and this resistor into this tube, into this capacitor, and you just keep going through parts, and it can destroy the tone long term, or it can be musical long term, and you've got to pay attention to every part. One part can ruin it.
Right, I imagine so.
Look, if I put the 7th fret in the wrong place, this guitar's useless.
Well, right.
I mean, it's the same thing with guitars in a different way, right?
Yeah.
It's all the parts in the amp have to be musical. Same thing with all the things on this guitar. And believe me, if you picked this up and there was something wrong with it, you'd pick up on it just like that, because guitar players are very sensitive to that. So are guitar players to amplifiers. There's something wrong, just like that, pick up on it.
Right.
And for me, my job is to make my artists happy, and then the market follows. I never really had anybody make a comment that they were real dynamic and they weren't compressing, but it's true, that thing's not compressing at all. It's only 20 watts.
Whether they commented or not, the players that you have behind some of these amps, like David Grissom, he's a very dynamic player. I mean, he's using that amplifier and using the volume control.
He's using it as an instrument.
Right, right. It's part of a system, or like you say, the whole thing becomes a whole.
He's got 3 different pedals driving at different amounts too. So how he drives the amp with his pedal board is a whole art form for him.
Do you test that when you're designing the amp and building it? Do you put pedals in front of it? Do you spend time with that aspect of it?
Very little. For me, plugging straight in is going to give me an idea. I can't duplicate the thousands of pedal boards, but I can duplicate what it's going to be plugged straight into it. And I just let that be where it lays. People say amps are pedal friendly, or they're not pedal friendly. And I'm positive if we put a Mary Cries compressor on the floor that it would function well with that. For me, plugging straight into the amp and having, which is what you're doing, you're plugged straight into that amplifier. You didn't need it. You didn't need a pedal to fix it. And very often when you don't need a pedal to fix it, it can handle whatever pedals there are.
Right. That's that balance thing again, and that dynamics thing.
Not too much bass. Look, you got an ice pick note coming out of it, and these chorus pedals are adding high end, which they are. It's going to get worse.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you want that balance. Very cool. It's got to be fun to see these amps on stage, and with the, I keep using that word, it's got to be fun, but to me that's what it's got to be, to see your work on stage with an artist like Mark Tremonti or a David Grissom and Lettieri and
It's more relief when the set's over. I mean, I've seen Carlos Santana come to the factory, pick out a guitar, put it in the back of the limo, go to the show, give it to the tech, he tunes it up, and he's playing it for 15,000 people. The guitar hasn't been played more than about 30 seconds in its life.
Right.
I'm sitting there going, you know. I watched him play it on the Oscars once, and they said, "How did it feel, Paul?" I said, "I was glad he got through it." You know, because Rupert Neve said something fascinating. They said, they were talking about the sound of this preamp, and that's the sound of that preamp, and he went off on everybody. He goes, "That was never the goal." They said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "I was trying to make sure the people at the BBC didn't get fired. If you lose a channel and you're on a TV show, the engineer gets fired. I was trying to make sure nobody got fired, and you guys are worried about the tone of it. I just needed it to work."
Right.
And if you
Right.
open those old concerts, they're built unbelievably strong.
Right.
There was nothing in there that had any chance of a solder joint coming loose, nothing. I mean, it was built industrial.
Right.
Which is why they weighed so much, because he was trying to make sure nobody got fired. In a way, you're going, it must be fun, and I'm going, I don't want anybody to get fired. Look, from a tech's point of view, you're just trying, you don't see tech smiling until the show's over. It's the way it works.
Yeah,
I don't know.
absolutely,
Look,
absolutely.
it's the same thing. Sweetwater's job is to make the problems go away, in a way. And
Yeah.
with the amps, my job's to make the problems go away.
Right. Well, you've succeeded.
Well, that's sweet.
Congratulations.
That's
They're
very
awesome.
sweet.
And this is a great demonstration of amps are designed to become part of your instrument and to create the sound, and it should do that. And a good amp will cover a broad range because of that.
It's not a normal thing we did, and it
Nope.
survived beautifully.
But it worked.
Well done.
Awesome.
All right,
Thanks,
good.
Paul. Always great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Let's do another one of
Appreciate it.
these soon.